I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot.
Lin-Manuel Miranda. So much talent. Who's on the horse? On the horse America, throwing his master. Who's on the horse?
I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot.
On the horse, King George. Road to the Revolution. How do we go from being British to throwing King George off the horse? The duty of a patriot is to protect his country from his government. Thomas Paine. When an unjust government is in power, the duty of a patriot is to change the government in the status quo. That's the road to the revolution. That's the revolution. Not having a king and queen anymore. It's determining our own government, having our democracy, our republic. Not that it's perfect. Road to the revolutionary pretest. When is it necessary to rebel against the government? When an unjust government is in power, the duty of a patriot. Really important map here. Look at the 13 colonies. They were part of Britain. They drank British tea. They loved the king and queen. They were British. So they had to go from being British to being the United States. The Treaty of Paris. French and Indians. Who won the war between? No, it didn't work like that. It was the French and the Indians versus the British. And the British won. As a result of the British winning, they went into debt big time. So all of a sudden, they needed the colonies to make money. So they started taxing the colonies more than they already did. The Proclamation of 1763. No colonists could go west of the line. Proclamation of 1763. Here you can see it. Proclamation. Next up, to pay for the war, the French and Indian versus the British war, the British won. They had to pass taxes. There wasn't stamps back then. They folded up a piece of paper, they put wax on it, and they mailed it. So Stamp Act was more about paper than actually stamps, but still angered the colonists. Next up, the Quartering Act. British soldiers lived in colonial houses and taverns and drank their beer and ate their Pringles. Well, I don't know about the Pringles, but I certainly know about the beer. This made the colonists very upset. They put it in the Third Amendment. Second Amendment's right to bear arms. First Amendment, freedom of speech. Here's the third. No soldier should in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. The cause was the Quartering Act. You had to house British soldiers. The effect, the Third Amendment. Next up, boycott. Don't buy British goods. All these taxes. Boycott. Made in the USA. This is where made in the USA comes from. Made in the USA. Don't buy British goods. Next up, Boston Massacre. You give me a picture and I'll give you a war. Paul Revere. He turned this into a massacre. 3, 4, or 5 shot. I've heard all numbers. Next up, Boston Tea Party. 342 chests of tea. Next up, Intolerable Acts, or the Coercive Acts, as they were called in Britain. We called them the Intolerable Acts, the colonists did. So the cause of it was the Boston Tea Party. The effect was Boston needed to be punished. Next up, as a result of this, that made the colonists mad. The effect was First Continental Congress. Over 100 white men rode their horses on mud roads to Philadelphia. For 2 months, they wrote a respectful letter to King George. Why was it a respectful letter? Remember this map? We were still British. Okay, these colonies still thought of themselves as British. So they weren't quite there yet. That's why it's called the road to the revolution. Next up, militias. Militias today has a lot to do with the National Guard. My dad was in the National Guard for about 20 years. These militias had been there, right to bear arms, Second Amendment. Colonists had weapons, but they were to defend against Native Americans generally, but most of the Native Americans were dead. Unpremeditated biological warfare, smallpox, the plague. But now they had a common enemy, the British. We were there in 1775. We weren't there in 1774 or 1768. Road to the revolution. Here's why we're doing this. Standard branch, causation, formal language. The one I like is the teacher and student language. I can explain how events have a cause and effect. So that's what your standard is about. That's what your assessment's about. Here's an example. December 7th, 1941, Oahu bombed by Japanese planes, December 7th, 1941. The next day, the United States declared war. Jeannette Rankin was the only person to vote to declare war. The cause? Japanese bombing our bases, the territory of Hawaii, December 7th. The effect? The next day, Congress declared war on Japan. Here's random order. Here's the order they're in. Here's your assessments, which you need to turn on in Power School. describe how three events are connected. How did one event lead to the next and then to the next? Please use three different events in your explanation. So you don't have to go in order of these and just do C, E, and I. You could do C and E. You could do A and G. You could do B and D. So they don't have to be right in order, but you need to at least have three different cause and events for this. Okay? Describe how three events are connected. How did one event lead to the next and then to the next? Please use three different events in your explanation. You can also do this on Flipgrid and turn it into me. So I'll make a category for that as well, and I'll include that link on PowerSchool. So you can do it in a paragraph. You can do it with bullet points. It doesn't necessarily need to be a paragraph, but obviously you get to do it to prove that you meet the standard. Right here is the standard. All right, I'm out, Mr. Halstead. Thanks.